Everybody. Going to be talking about a few of the things I enjoyed and feel that were good or especially interesting about this past week's Maker Study Hall books. The books were Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora, Neale, Hurston, Think Again by Adam Grant, and Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I think there was a interesting storyline within the Klara and the Sun book. There's a exploration of something called AFs and what society could look like when people are alongside robots or automated structures in general. There's a lot of subtlety in the book overall. I think a lot of the themes that the book explores revolve around the nature of self and just what community can look like in a society where some are constructed while others are born, and just the kind of caste systems as well as other social dynamics that arise or are imposed as a result of those kinds of social considerations. I think there was a lot of time spent on the introspection of Klara and just the relationships she built with Josie, her mother, as well as later on with the father. I think a lot of the later development was beyond just Klara and just how the family related to her and what she came to represent. There are a lot of existential questions that the book explores, and I think there was a lot of something that seemed like growth throughout the book, yet with a robotic system, it's worth wondering if it's static and just seems like growth, and it's just like traversing a static space, if that makes sense. Like, not sure what the description would be, but it's kind of like climbing a tree would be different for generations of individuals, but they could all climb a lineage of a tree. But if you build like a playground and it's like a jungle gym, you could still climb the same structure over generations, but it's more static than if it was a tree per se. I enjoyed the book in general. There's like a lot of lessons that can be gleaned from it, and definitely worth exploring. The next book was Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora, Neale, Hurston. More of a adventure kind of story. There is a lot around the nature of society moving from slavery times to times with more freedom. There's a lot of development around what love looks like with those kinds of social origins, as Janie finds love and connection to a partner as well as her communities. the focus often shifts from her as an individual to what she reflects as a member of a broader community, and just the kind of communities of which she's a part. There's also more exploration of the themes of escapism and just the kinds of ways communities under stress find escape or build community, either by having various kinds of gatherings and social spaces or through various substances. The dynamics of power that are explored in the book are also interesting, and just the nicknames that are given to members of the community are kind of a form of affection that is shown. There was certain scenes that seemed like things were possibly going to fall apart for the couple, though how they came back together and just the reasons things potentially fell apart was interesting to see. Just the way the story develops is kind of like a roller coaster in a way, though there's certain parts where you think you're gonna be able to guess what's gonna happen, and it ends up being close but slightly different. There's also a fair amount that's spent in terms of developing the characters throughout the community and just how they represent a specific archetype while also maintaining their own individuality. There are also several segments throughout where there's a highlight that's made between distinctions imposed by society among its members that aren't made by nature or more eternal forces. And it's eye-opening to see those kinds of considerations, and just imbues a certain kind of hope in terms of just having more of the natural orders integrated within society, just the kind of equity that nature can offer. There's definitely a lot in the book. I think it'll be good to read and explore. Be good to see any dream marks you have after your reading as well, and just which scenes stuck out to you, or which were your favorites, or which kind of irked you or upset you in some ways. Definitely many layers to Their Eyes Were Watching God as well. And the third book is called Think Again by Adam Grant. The book explores our assumed biases, as well as the value of reanalyzing, reassessing how we came to hold a certain set of beliefs, as well as just the nature of various mental shortcuts or generalizations that we might make about individuals, spaces, or specific ways of thinking or being, and if they are actually beneficial. There are a lot of examples throughout the book, and they help add weight to the conclusions and reasoning that are shared throughout. Overall, in the book, there are 5 parts. The first explores individual rethinking. The second part is interpersonal rethinking. And the third part is collective rethinking. Within those 3 themselves is just the different hierarchies into which society can be deconstructed. The individual, interpersonal, and collective. I think the examples that are focused on larger companies are useful in terms of just having like a macro social lens. And then there's the more specific examples of how individuals relate to each other, either from the author's classrooms and alumni, or from other case studies and instances that he's included within the text. There's also the 4th and 5th parts of the book, as well as the final sections, which include the actionable steps. And it's like 30 mental shortcuts or mental reframings that are helpful for reassessing a situation or thinking about how you're moving into a conversation or mode of being such that it's more purposeful, but also less prone to misconceptions or the 2 kinds of biases that are outlined in the book that are at the root of a lot of the assumptions that end up not panning out that the author describes. I think there was like a lot around the modern era in terms of just how businesses grew, what kept the teams together, what was beneficial for the teams in terms of who they brought onto the team and why a specific team dynamic was better For instance, the example with Apple and how Mike Lazzaretti went about it, choosing the members of his team to be more disagreeable in a sense, but working to be givers rather than takers, such that they address specific potential issues or design aspects openly rather than letting it be somebody else's responsibility. It was a more collaborative environment. And later on in the book, there's the examples of the studies that were done between rival teams and just how we view people that we assume to be our opposition, and just the kind of situations in which we decide to work together versus continuing to hardline the assumed lines of division. There's also considerations of vaccines and how students accept specific forms of knowledge and just which kinds of sources get questioned or accepted at face value, and just how it could change the nature of the material if we go in with a more questioning mindset rather than just assuming everything in the text is correct. It was the example specifically about students being given text for their studies that was in the older textbooks and weren't the most up-to-date, and just the students thinking everything in the text was to be taken as is rather than being more critical of the material. While on one side, there's the assumption that textbooks in a class are going to be what should be studied, while on the other, there's the mentality of always approaching acquiring knowledge with a questioning frame of growth. I think there's a lot in the books overall. There's definitely several examples, and they'll be able to help guide readers in terms of applying the lessons described to their own situations, as well as situations of friends or colleagues, and just trying to make it as broad of a net as possible in terms of who the examples might be directed towards, in terms of who they'd actually be most relevant towards helping. I think the structure of the book is also very actionable in terms of just the last section specifically, and just how it weaves together the book overall. Oftentimes I think a lot of the pitfalls we can experience or fall into throughout daily or longer term experiences are a result of just the assumptions that we build up. And I think a lot of the discussion in this book helps to provide a method for reassessing, which can be useful. Those are some thoughts about the readings for this past week. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It'll be great to see any dream arcs you make. You can post those on the Nonk Facebook page for Maker Study Hall. You can either post them in the comments or you can share them over a direct message. Hopefully you enjoyed what you read. I hope to see what you make. And I hope your week is off to a great start. Have a great day, everybody.